Hello, hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk Ray Bradbury. If you have not subscribed to our channel, please do. So here on Let's Talk Ray Bradbury, my current project is to review all 100 stories in his collection, The Stories of Ray Bradbury. We are on to story number 21 of 100. Today's tale is The Fire Balloons from 1951. So in this story, priests, Father Stone and Father Peregrine, lead a rocket filled full of priests to Mars to become missionaries to the Martians. When they get there, they find the human Martian towns where there's already thousands of sinful immigrants waiting to be missioned to. But Father Peregrine learns that there's one species of natives still alive who present themselves as shimmering blue floating orbs in the sky, and he's very curious. He wants to find out their nature, whether they have souls, whether they have sin, and whether he can save them from eternal damnation in hell. So Peregrine, who is obviously very open-minded, takes one of his fellow priests, Father Stone, who is not open-minded, who's very dogmatic, really. He takes him up into the hills, decides that they're going to present themselves to these orbs, try to find out who and what they are. So when they're in the mountains, they call out to these orbs and inadvertently cause a landslide. And then all of a sudden, when they should be dead, they find themselves safely back on level ground. Peregrine sees this as definitive proof that they were saved by the shimmering orbs. Stone, he's kind of skeptical. He thinks that maybe by some anomaly they just sort of landed on their feet, whatever. But Peregrine, he knows that the orbs, in fact, have souls and saved his life. But that night, he wants to set out and prove it once and for all. So he gets up from his camp while Stone is sleeping, goes up onto a ledge, throws himself off it, first saying to God that, it looks like suicide, but there's a point to it. It's for your glory. I know you'll forgive me, right? So in mid-flight, suddenly he finds himself surrounded by light and then put back on level ground. That's the proof that he needs, but it's not enough proof for Stone, who is still back at the camp sleeping. So back at the camp, Father Peregrine takes out a pistol, which he had brought to protect himself from any wild animals. He wakes up Stone, he grabs the gun, and he shoots it at himself. The bullet is miraculously stopped in midair by a blue orb, and suddenly now both of them it's been proven to both of them that these in fact do seem to be moral beings who have made a moral choice to save the life of somebody who is in danger of dying. So, they think it's time to build a church now, to begin ministering to these beings. So they go back down to town, they collect their priests and their materials, and they come back up into the hills, and they set about building a sort of an open-air church. At the center of it is to be an altar. On that altar, they hope to design a sort of a glass orb with a flame inside it to represent sort of a version of Christ that hopefully these beings can comprehend. Father Peregrine explains that when they go to other areas of the world, sometimes the religion's adapted to be able to be understandable to the natives there, and this is sort of a similar situation. Sunday comes around, or the day that they think is Sunday. They're not quite sure because they are on Mars, but it's Sunday for them back on Earth. So they have their first church service. The one father begins playing the organ, and they sort of call out to their friends, and lo and behold, after several minutes of waiting, a group of orbs comes down to visit. And one telepathically sort of enters Peregrine's mind and explains to him that, hey, this is all well and good, I'm glad you're thinking about us, but we are ascended beings who 10,000 years earlier learned to leave our sinful bodies behind. We no longer feel troubled by lust and by greed and by crime and all the sinful things. But, it's nice that you're thinking of us, but why don't you go back down to your own town and sort of minister to all those sinful earthlings, and maybe someday later when you're more holy, we'll talk to you. So basically, they've been owned. That said, after the orbs disperse and they go back down to their sinful lives, they decide that the symbol of the orb which they created for this altar will remain the sort of the symbol for Christ for these new inhabitants sharing Earth religions on Mars. Usually so rigid, Father Stone theorizes that the meaning of all of this is that there's a little bit of truth everywhere in the universe, and that sort of it's not all back on Earth. They don't know it all from just the Bible, and that now that they're going out amongst the stars, it's their quest or their duty to learn a little bit more about the sort of the truth of reality and of spirituality and existence everywhere they go, and to eventually maybe one day gather all of that wisdom back together and be able to finally understand the whole big picture of the universe. So, this is a wonderful little story, written in a very poetic way. It very almost has a sense of religiosity. Is that the word? To it. It feels like it's draped in holiness, and it's very thought-provoking too. The main thing is the nature of sin. Does it exist on a world where there was no Adam and Eve to commit an original sin? One father says yes. The other wonders if. And are sins the same when you leave Earth? Are sins the same everywhere? It would be just like humans, I think, to go anywhere around this world or around another world and think that, everybody should sort of fall into line with what we believe to be the sort of the nature of God and the universe. That'd be just like us. But it's really, really thought-provoking to wonder that. I also thought it was interesting how they discussed the mutation of religions as they spread around not just Earth, but also, in this story, the solar system. We've seen, and there's some examples in the story where, like, in some South American countries, Christ is displayed with dark skin. In some Asian sects, there are portrayals of God in Oriental robes with Oriental facial features. But I do like that the one priest here is open to the idea that it could still be essentially Christianity when you take it to Mars, but it may have to take on a different look to be sort of comprehensible and sort of lasting and understandable for these other types of beings. It's a lot of interesting things to think about. But it also calls to mind, and Bradbury doesn't really get into it, but one thing that made me think about was, you look at these stories historically of, from my perspective, primarily Europeans traveling around the world, and then, of course, inevitably, missionaries go with them, and they find people who don't look and act like them, very primitive, relatively primitive peoples, people of different colored skin. And there was always that question of, are these beasts that look like men, or do they have souls like us? And it'd be very easy, I imagine, that if you went out to another planet, found beings, it'd be just like humans to wonder about that, and to maybe justify conquest by saying, well, these are subhuman, they're soulless beings. So it's a lot to think about, and actually, we're closer than ever to really having to worry about these issues. If SpaceX, Elon Musk, NASA, and some other organizations succeed in the next few decades, we may very well have settlements on Mars and the Moon. And how will the people living their lives there address and think about religion? Will they take their own Earth religions with them and continue to practice them as normal? Or will they sort of begin to tackle these big questions and wonder, is it all connected, or was their God on Earth just intended for Earth? So, yeah, the fire balloons from 1951, the stories of Ray Bradbury. Next up, we'll be talking about The Last Night of the World from 1951. Looking forward to that. And thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.